welcome to listeners everywhere. My name is Phil Dye. In this episode, I'll be interviewing Professor John Whitehall, a paediatric specialist with over 30 years' experience, and he'll be talking about gender dysphoria and really focusing in on puberty blockers and the impact that they have on the individual. And you're going to hear the words of Bunny, now someone who's 20 years old, but who started the gender transition process at school at the age of 16. A girl with a trauma background who transitioned to a boy and has now detransitioned. Here's some words from a recent tweet from Bunny.
The trans community lied to me. When I was a teenager, I was told that this discomfort I was feeling is just that I was meant to be a boy. And that if I transitioned, I would feel great. I would feel euphoric. It would be everything. But looking back, I think if someone at that time would have just said, no. Just told me no. Just been like, no, we're gonna get you the help you need. It's just a normal teenage thing to feel uncomfortable in your body. Maybe I wouldn't be where I am today.
And with that, I'll begin the interview with Professor John Whitehall. And I began by asking him if gender transitioning amongst school-age students was as big an issue as the media and some groups would make out.
I recollect when I first became aware of this phenomenon, which was in 2015, having been a general paediatrician for a number of years, I polled friends of mine, 28 in fact, paediatricians, and I said, have you ever heard of this? What do you think? Cumulative years then of 931 years of practice, they could only remember about 12. And 10 of those they remembered because of the comorbid psychiatric condition, and 2 because of the associated sexual abuse. In those days, we used to teach students, and we were aware ourselves, that if a young person was saying they're of the opposite sex, you need to work out, are they escaping from abuse at home? So from that, very rare prevalence of it, and that's corroborated by other studies. So it was very rare in those years, but now you wouldn't know what the actual prevalence was because it's out there as a kind of a social contagion. Some people would say it's like a psychological fad, but I don't saying that. I mean it's communicative, it's a psychological issue, it's spread from one to another, but I'm not minimizing the suffering involved.
Self-harm in the form of cutting, in the form of starvation or self-poisoning or burning doesn't seem to quite be as prevalent, but gender dysphoria is. Do you think it's taken over perhaps as a form of self-harm in order to escape something?
It certainly is characterized by its association, its comorbid association with mental disorder in children. Indeed, the Lancet, that journal from England, was considering just the other week, why is there such a rise in anxiety and depression in adolescents these days, in particular girls? Now, that's a question I can't answer. But in association with that mental instability, this phenomenon has occurred. Many of them are autistic. It's a sort of a neurodevelopmental problem. That, too, is more common now than it used to be. So I don't understand the reason for this.
John, when I was 15, I tried to commit suicide by taking my mother's sleeping tablets. I didn't take enough of them, thank goodness, but I'm certainly glad that when I went to the hospital, the staff didn't say, "Oh, look, we're going to affirm your decision. You're 15 and, it's a legitimate decision. We're going to just give you a needle to put you out of your misery, and you can rest assured that your decision has been affirmed." I'm certainly glad that didn't happen.
Yes, indeed. I mean, they have come to this diagnosis themselves with the help of friends, the media, and as we were saying before, the web and everything. They've come to this diagnosis. There's certain notoriety about it these days. It certainly gets you noticed. You certainly can create a fuss at school, and you can even become the cheerleader at school. And you don't really understand the future. No child of that age really understands the maturity of sexuality or gender of these. They say they do, but we don't allow them to make decisions of anywhere near that consequence, such as tattooing themselves or driving a car or joining the army.
Or buying a bottle of gin at the bottle shop.
Exactly. We don't trust them with that. But here we trust them with this clamour. This painful clamour, because it causes all sorts of trouble if you try to give it, if you try to object to it, and therefore they get their own way. And this is a tragedy. And end up growing a beard that they regret and so forth, and are sterilised in the process after the surgery. And what then?
John, I'm just going to play you the words of a trans activist with a message on Twitter. Here are his words.
Here are the actual facts. Fact. Medical professionals are not giving puberty blockers to children who have not reached puberty. Fact. Puberty blockers are fully reversible.
John, are puberty blockers fully reversible?
This is an exceedingly frustrating thing because, no, they're not reversible. And there is abundant literature to prove that. From rodents to animals. Now, people will say, well, why are you basing it on animal studies? Well, every other medical thing is based on animal study. If you give like a sheep a new drug and it drops dead, well, you don't pursue that line of treatment. Now, sheep in particular have been given puberty blockers around that peripubertal time. And then they did MRI studies on their brains, found that the limbic system, which is in the midbrain area, and it coordinates thinking and emotion and drive and reward and leads you, therefore, to make the decisions that you think are appropriate to that new assessment of yourself. That was hypertrophied in these sheep, and then when they donated themselves to science, so to speak, and people were looking under the microscope, a molecular microscope, they found that many genes, the function of genes was either up-regulated or down-regulated, and these were very basic constituent genes. So what had happened to these sheep that didn't make the ultimate sacrifice? Well, they were much more behaviourally disturbed. Their memory was disturbed.
Did they get better?
No. This was a sustained effect.
So it had effect on the brain of the sheep?
That's correct. On the limbic system in particular, and that was reflected in sustained alteration in their behaviour. Now, I don't know why. The children's hospitals continue to assert, like this mantra, that puberty blockers are safe and entirely reversible when they can look up the literature. If I look up the literature, they could do it.
Yes, interestingly, I contacted the Royal Children's Hospital Gender Service in Melbourne with the idea of talking to Associate Professor Michelle Telfer, asking her similar questions that I would ask you. But no, I was told that there was no one who could speak to me at this time. I then contacted the Maple Leaf House in Newcastle, a transgender support service, and I was told that they'd get back to me, and I rang them again, but of course they didn't get back to me. Now, what about the cross-sex hormones, estrogen and testosterone, are people given enough information about that?
With regard to the cross-sex hormones, sure, the children's hospitals and others, they'll give you a whole list of complications. Yeah, you can get thrombosis, you can get other things and other things, but they never mention, and this is an odd thing, they never mention the studies by Hulshoff-Poll and others, and they found that if you put adult males on estrogen, by MRI studies actually measuring the distance, the brain shrinks at a rate 10 times faster than aging. Full stop. Now, you never hear that. Can you imagine the fuss? And if one branch of the medical profession, forgot to tell you that people's brains shrink at a rate 10 times faster than aging after only 4 months, can you think of the fuss?
So this is for a boy transitioning to a girl when they're given estrogen?
That was males on estrogen. The girl getting the testosterone, their grey matter, the zones increased in size. Well, now, nobody knows at a molecular level, because you can't hold these people down and take a brain sample off them, nobody knows what the actual effect is. But they have measured the effect on the MRI. But they don't even talk about that, you see.
And what are the age limit restrictions on transitioning?
The guidelines, the Australian guidelines put out by the Children's Hospital, did away with the age limits, except they were mentioning you shouldn't have surgery under the age of 18. But essentially, there is no age limit to it. And what their health department is advising, say, the 84 doctors in New South Wales who are doing it, is that you can start the hormones basically at any age in that area, as long as you have agreement by the child and by both parents. If you have contest between the parents, then that has to go to court. So this boy thinks he's a girl, and he's puberty blocked, and he wants to go ahead with it. Now he's, say, 12, and all the other girls around him are getting breasts. Worse, when he's 14, everyone's got breasts, and he hasn't. And he's the one wearing a dress. And he's the one, you see, there's the argument out there by these people, well, you're just being cruel now, not to give cross hormones, because he's standing out as a sort of a breastless, immature girl.
You're listening to the first of the Filtered podcasts. My name is Phil Dye, and I'm talking to Professor John Whitehall, a paediatrician with over 30 years' experience. John, in my research, I searched through many articles and found that 69% of all individuals who are transgendered had a ACE trauma, childhood trauma score of 3 or 4. That means that they had had events of childhood trauma in their life, at least 3 or 4 of them. That trauma could be childhood sexual abuse, it could be physical abuse, it could be a parent with depression, etc. When a young person goes to transition in Australia, are these causes of it? Are these events of childhood trauma, which may still be going on? A child could still be being abused in the family situation. Are they investigated and dealt with before gender transition is considered?
Well, you would hope it would be looked at in depth before you took this massive medical intervention, but I'm not comforted by that. There is a report from Western Australia that I'm involved with just at the moment, and what they are saying is that normally there is this process of assessment of psychological problems, but these children may be directed first to the endocrinologist, So you can imagine they got the girl who was really insistent, and the parent is going along with it. And you can imagine people saying, well, gee, we better maybe put her on give in and put her on the cross-sex hormones and so forth. It is not formalized that should not occur, as it is in Finland. Here, that there is freedom, as far as I can see, to cut short the diagnostic process and the sort of cognitive therapy process to reorientate the person with the chromosomes with which they were born.
And John, you mentioned Finland, and by anyone's measures, Finland is a very progressive country. What are they doing differently, and how did they get to this state of doing things differently?
And I was speaking with one of their psychiatrists just recently, and that is in fact what she was saying. They were astonished by this rise of mentally disordered girls who had heard that or learnt that they were boys, and they were looking therefore and insisting that they pursue the cross-gendering pathway. And when they looked more closely at it, they were astonished at how affected these children were. Like really doing badly in life, staying at home, not socializing, doing badly at school, really in a general kind of slough of mental disorder. And then they hear this kind of siren call that the answer is to be found in becoming a boy.
And how easy is it to find doctors who will begin gender transitioning with children from an early age?
There are 84 general practices practices in New South Wales alone, which have set themselves up in order to help people transgender. And there is no age limit that I can see there at all, which would restrict them, nor, as far as I can see, is there any obligation to undergo any kind of investigative therapeutic psychotherapy. None. So it's like the horse has come out of the stable, and now we don't even know where the horse is.
So before a child is going to have hormones, either estrogen or testosterone, their puberty has to be blocked, and they take puberty blockers so that they're a blank slate, and the hormones can then do their job. At what age can someone start puberty blockers?
Well, the recommendations, but again, these are recommendations. These are not sort of laws. The recommendation is that you would start puberty blockers when the child reached Tanner stage 2 of puberty, which is development of breast buds in a girl and some enlargement of the testes in a boy. Now, that's a very, very that's not rocket science to actually measure those things. The youngest one in the records was 10 years old. Now, that was a boy, a natal boy, and who knows? Did they feel his testicles to see whether they were a bit bigger or not? He had put up a significant argument that he was a girl before that. That boy record of having diagnosed or been diagnosed with mental disorder of significant amount of depression and so forth. But whether they looked at the trauma or whatever, I don't know about the trauma. But yes, there were associated comorbidities.
John, look, one final question. If a young person transitions and later on in life, perhaps they get to the age of 20 and 21 and they decide that this is not for them, they've got continued psychological problems, that transitioning hasn't cured them, changed them, and they wish to then detransition and go back, and they're very angry about it, and they decide they're going to sue the doctors that did this. They're going to sue the education departments that let it occur on their watch. They're going to even sue their parents. Is this something that could happen, that we could see this avalanche of cases against institutions?
Well, of course it could happen. I wonder why it happened already. The court case, the High Court case in Australia, the precedent for this was by a Mrs. Whitaker against an ophthalmic surgeon, Dr. Rogers, and he inadvertently failed to tell Mrs. Whitaker of the 1 in 14,000 chance that operating on the bad eye would so influence in an autoimmune type way the good eye that blindness might occur. So the court declared that a doctor has the awesome responsibility to explain properly and fully and be satisfied that everything is explained regarding complications that might occur 1 in 14,000. That had they known about those things, they wouldn't go ahead with the treatment. Now, how can that possibly happen? These people are saying puberty blockers are safe and entirely reversible. Well, already for 10 years, it has been known in sheep that that's not so.
John, thanks for talking to us. I know we'll cop some flack for this episode, but it is the well-being of children that we have in mind.
It's a miserable, awful, sad problem, and the children are being caught up in this, and my heart goes out to them because they're obviously suffering children, and they're going to suffer more. I mean, irreparable changes to their brain and certainly to their breast, to their body, and everything like this is the pathway that they are being encouraged to walk down. Now, that is a really, really sad thing.
And that was Professor John Whitehall, a paediatrician with more than 30 years' experience. So, what can be done about all this? I think the medical staff, the parents, the education bureaucracy, who obviously aren't asking the right questions, their heart's probably in the right place and they believe very much in what they're doing. However, when our health system, our education system, our university system and our media get hijacked by progressive extremists and the spokespeople for those groups, then we know that there is a problem. Well, perhaps one of the first steps would be for other parts of the rainbow flag to have a chat to the transition community and say, yes, look, we're all very happy to be in this rainbow flag, but I think there's one part of the transition story that is more a nightmare than a fairy tale. This idea of transitioning for children while they're at school and under the age of 18. They can't drink, they can't go and gamble, they can't get a tattoo, but they can go and change their gender. There seems something very wrong with that, and other parts of the rainbow flag can certainly have an influence in this. What else can be done is that the media can play a more balanced part. I personally call on the ABC to have a article on gender detransitioning. They're all very, very fine at this gender affirming angle, but the idea of gender detransitioning seems something they're not going to touch. If we are going to avoid one of the darkest times in medical history, then we have to stop this promotion of gender transition to the under 18s and school-age kids. We've had many dark days in medical history. One of the darkest was with thalidomide, a drug that was given to pregnant women to stop their nausea. Worldwide, it resulted in the birth of 10,000 babies who were extremely disabled, born with no arms and legs. And an Australian doctor, William McBride, discovered that this was being caused by the drug thalidomide, which was being widely prescribed here in Australia and around the world. A disaster. Again, A little bit later on, they stopped the lobotomy program, which was where a Dr. Freeman would do lobotomies. Now, a lobotomy was he used an ice pick actually to go through the eye in order to carve out parts of the brain which were causing mental illness. He did this with children. He did it with adults. He did it with the sister of the then President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, who had a mental illness. He did it. The poor woman then could not eat, talk or walk, and lived out the rest of her life in various asylums. So there has been many medical disasters in the past 100 years, and it's highly likely that the gender transitioning of young people, under 18s, school-aged children, within the next 20 years will be one of them. And we'll be looking back at this time as one of the darkest periods in world medical history. I'm going to let a detransitioner, Kat Cattinson from the USA, just round up this episode. My name's Phil Dye. I'll see you again soon.
Some very loud voices, trans activists within the community are really speaking for people who are not trans identified and trying to basically construct the narrative about all of society based on like this small minority group. And I think that's really dangerous for, young impressionable people